Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event. I am Willie Santiago, the manager of programs and resources for APAP. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a fair-skinned Hispanic person with brown eyes, medium-length wavy brown hair, and I am wearing a maroon shirt with a gray vest. I want to acknowledge that APAP is located in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway, Anacostan, and Pamunkey people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. And I like to pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and future. Closed captioning is available for today's event. If you wish to turn on captioning, click Show Captions on the bottom of the Zoom window. We are joined today by ASL interpreters from Purple, Rachel Levi and Julia Morgan. Thank you both for collaborating with us today for our event. If you need further accommodations during today's session, please feel free to direct message me in the chat, and I will do my best to assist you. APAP is your go-to resource for the connections and resources you need to build your career as a performing arts professional in the presenting, booking, and touring field. Join APAP as we continue to provide opportunities for community, learning, commerce, and discovery. You can visit apap365.org/membership for more information, or if you have questions, please contact us at info@apap365.org. We do have some upcoming programming through our year-round program. On March 4th, we have at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Get Release Ready, Insider Strategies for a Successful Album Launch. That is being hosted by Clay Ross and Jamie Stone, who are with Compose Your Career. This will be a webinar on how to create and launch a successful album. And then following that, immediately at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, we will have our arts compensation webinar, which will be an info session on the arts compensation project that APAP has started, which is a salary survey of the field to provide more accurate benchmarks for where we are. And with that, for more information on upcoming programming, you can visit apap365.org/programs. And I will now turn things over to Stephanie McKee.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie McKee Anderson. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Executive Artistic Director of Junebug Productions in New Orleans, Louisiana. I am a brown-skinned person wearing cream-colored cat eye glasses with a green top. I'm very happy to be here and happy to be a part of this conversation with my partners and co-conspirators in the field of Shannon Judson from Urban Bushwomen, and also with Ana Maria Alvarez and her co-conspirator at CONTRA-TIEMPO, Holly Sunju Johnston. So happy to be here. We're going to have some deeper introductions. I'll let everybody kind of self-introduce themselves, but I want to give a bit of a grounding for this conversation, which is around a culture of care, which is a very curious thing for me when we entered into like unpacking what that means. And so what that means to me is if you're a person who is showing up 15 minutes late for something that you know you had to be at several days ago, if you feel like you have, about 25% you're operating at, 25% of what your 100% could potentially be. If you feel like things are swirling around and it's very difficult to grab a hold of that, then I consider you my people. Because this has been just that kind of year, kind of several years, to be perfectly honest. This is how our world is. And though I'm making light of how changes happen on the inside of our field, making light of it, but it does have a real effect on the people that we work with, has an effect on the folks that we partner with, has an effect on the artists that we are working with. And that the thing that we have all shared has been coming this pandemic that we've all been in, and we share that experience. I think it's our responsibility to be able to talk very openly and honestly around how that has really affected us, how it affects us personally, our families, the artists that we work with, the people that we partner with, and those venues. We'd be silly not to think that that did not have an effect on us. So for us, this conversation around a culture of care is just that. It's a conversation. So we don't come to you as the experts on culture of care. We are not. We are in the struggle with you, with what that means and examining what that means. This conversation is just that, a conversation and not a how-to guide. I think I speak for all of us when I say we are trying to do away with this idea that one approach, one time that worked is the only approach, right? Because things change. Communities are not a monolith, and neither are we. And so we know that that means that that will take a number of approaches. And then afterwards, we'll come back and we'll look for our people again and have another conversation about what it is that we learned. I hope that's really clear to everyone, that it is about a conversation. And hopefully we'll be able to have some questions and things from you and feedback. So feel free to use the chat. We're encouraging you to use the chat. The aha moments, the things that stick out to you, if you will put that in with a little asterisk by it, it helps us to know the things that are resonating with you. It helps us to be in call and response with you in real time as well. I hope that's clear. And with that, I'm gonna, if I can pass the baton, I'll pass the baton on to Ana Maria, and then you pick someone else to pass on to for a self-introduction.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate this framing so much, because as we were just saying, this idea of people first and culture of care is a way of being. It is not a replicating action plan. So you're not going to leave here with the action plan. You're going to leave here hopefully feeling more grounded in this, this way of being. Excited about this conversation. My name is Ana Maria. I go by she, her. Ana Maria Alvarez, go by she, her. I am the founding artistic director of CONTRA-TIEMPO. I am a fair-skinned Latina woman who got brown hair. I just got a haircut. I have glasses and a black shirt, and I'm sitting inside of an academic office. And I would say that I am calling in from Kumeyaay land, the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people, who have a rich and complex history that predates both Spanish and Anglo arrivals in this region, and would like to honor and pay respect to those Kumeyaay people, past, present, and future. This land is also known as San Diego. And I'm just very excited to be with you all, and I'm going to pass it to Shannon.
Hey, everyone. Looking up in alignment with everything that's been named about the opportunity for today. I'm excited to share. I'm also excited to learn. I am here as one of the co-artistic directors for Urban Bushwoman, and we are likened in being in a space of activating care and wellness practices, some that are long seeked inside of this organization 40 years, some that we are dynamically implementing and discovering right now. We are in motion. So this conversation is happening at a point where change is ripe and present and urgent. I am a Black woman with milk chocolatey brown skin. My hair is natural and kinky and nested on top of my head and a updo. I am wearing an olive colored shirt. I'm also calling from, zooming in from an academic office representing my other home team, University at Buffalo, where I'm on a visiting associate line here. And here in Buffalo right now, which is historically and presently the land of the Seneca Nation, it's also a major portal in the Underground Railroad. So I'm just reaches away from where Harriet Tubman crossed from Buffalo into Canada to lead folks into a greater sense of liberation. And that's also very present with me. And I am going to pass to Holly.
Hi, everyone. So good to be with you. I'm Holly Johnston. I am a somatic ecologist with CONTRA-TIEMPO, also creator and director of Responsive Body, which is a somatic practice engaged in expanding sort of our arts and sciences of loving, trying to understand deeply what it might mean to be in the actions of our own liberation as our bodies, through our bodies. I am a Korean American, adopted. I am wearing a beige sweater, blue shirt. I have dyed orange, red hair, long down towards my back. And I'm really, excited to be present with all of you. Feels like just even the agreement to stop, gather, be, just that in the middle of the day feels so welcome. So I'm just excited for the stop, pause, listen, and gathering space that we've created today. So good to be with you.
Thank you so much, Holly. As I mentioned before, the conversation today is not a how-to guide, but just rather we're a group of artists committed to reflecting on both ourselves and our work in an effort to be the change that we want to see in the world. And we hope that you guys will be also a part of that movement of being this type of change on the inside of the world that we'd like to see. With that, I'm going to pose a question to all of you, actually. So everybody else in the room, please sit with this for a minute and think about it. But I'm going to pose it first to Ana Maria. And I'm going to ask you to tell a story. Tell a story about how a culture of care or lack of care impacted you and your work. And then what shifts have you found in your work as a result of that?
Thank you so much, Stevie. I think that when I think about the idea of culture of care, I immediately go to the place that felt like I was most burnt out in my entire life. A place where after, I did want to just I introduced myself as the founding artistic director of CONTRA-TIEMPO, but I'm one of 4 directors. As I'm representing our 4 directors. We have horizontalized our leadership in the last several years, and they're all here with us in spirit, absolutely. I feel like what wound up moving exponentially the ways in which we are working happened right before the pandemic, actually, where, I think, again, 15 years of just like deep hustling, grinding, pushing for the vision and mission of CONTRA-TIEMPO, which has always been rooted in using dance as a mechanism for social change. The idea that dancing, are moving in our bodies and dancing with these ancestral technologies of Afro-Latinx ancestral practices, that these practices can have us access more liberation and community and connection, and that by dancing and moving, we can therefore create shifts in the world as we know it in our relationship with each other and ourselves. And so having an organization that had that root as a framework was very ironic, that the ways in which we were moving and grooving through the world was so it was depleting. It was depleting all of us. you know, we were, for the first decade, we were convincing the field that what we were doing was actually legitimate and belonged on the concert stage. Once we've convinced everyone of that, then it became really about grinding and getting as many. I'm going to keep using the word grinding because it literally is physically like grinding someone into like a nub. And it's what is kind of the expectation, I think, oftentimes of artists is to push and push and push and push and hustle and get your work out there, and, you know, keep working on the next thing. And it was not part of the conversation to stop and check in and be in relationship with each other and our bodies in a way that actually moved from stillness. And I just think this like level of grind for this many years, I was at a point where I was like, I was about to throw in the towel, honestly. And we were having some major kind of imploding in personal relationships in our organization. We were not moving from a place of care. We were moving from a place of just urgency always. And I think we kind of were at this almost like a breaking point right before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit, and at the same time, from the outside world, we had a huge touring season. We had tons of, you know, grants and gigs, and we were thriving as according to like what the field would have like looked in from the outside, but inside felt not healthy and good. And the pandemic put everything to a screeching halt, and overnight we lost more than half of our budget. And, you know, there was this decision that both Jessica Amaya at this time was our managing director and myself had to look at each other in the eye and say, okay, do we put everything on halt and we basically stop and lay everyone off and we just throw in the towel and we say, this is it? Or do we use the small amount of money that we have to actually gather weekly with our folks and use this as an opportunity to reground in our values and what we're actually about and what we care about? And we chose the latter, and it was the best choice that we ever made, which was to just halt everything and just check in with one another and spend hours on hours weekly on Zoom with one another, supporting one another, checking in with one another, doing repair for much of the like trauma, damage, harm that had been created by functioning in this way for so many years. And worked with Quetzal Flores, who is somebody who really is an artist and artist activist in Los Angeles, but does a lot of work around transformative justice. At the same time, I started actually working with Holly one-on-one with my own kind of trying to sort of like do my own internal work of like how, as a child of the movement, how I had let this happen, right? How I'd like gotten so caught up inside of a framework that was so depleting and so against what I actually stood for, that there was repair that needed to be done inside of me as a person also, in order to like be able to shift and lead in the ways that I was being called forth to do. So it's a much longer and more complicated story, but I will say that several years later, we are now in a place where we have been practicing the deep work of centering our human beings that are a part of our organization. We have horizontalized our leadership. We now have Holly as an actual staff member who has a role in the company. She works directly with all of our dancers and our staff members one-on-one, as well as she attends our rehearsals and is inside of our creative practice and is in a constant conversation with us around the ecology and the ecosystem of our organization, and how it is really centering care and centering human beings and centering love. And it doesn't always, it's not easy work, and it doesn't always, it's not that we do it well all the time, right? Like there are times often that we're like, whoop, we're going down a road and we're like, nope, we see where we're going, and we pull it back and do the work that it takes to kind of shift and move and respond. but I will say the level both of the work, artistically, the rigor, the like our capacity to like be involved and engaged in the themes of the work, the ideas of our work actually moving society is happening on such a different level than it was ever possible for it to happen, because we're moving in alignment with our values now. And again, I just think it would not have, I almost in some ways would not have been possible without the opportunity that the pandemic was, which was to screech to a halt and have to actually make the choice to either pivot and stay in relationship or pivot and be done. And I just think that the choice of staying in relationship is what gave us our work currently. And so, yeah, I think that's the.
Yeah, I think that gives us a really great, you lay out a great picture of what it means to stand at the crossroads, right? To be in that space of like, there's several different directions you can go. So you have choices. When you're at the crossroad, it doesn't mean that you don't have choices. In fact, you've got a lot of choices that could be made. So I really appreciate you kind of laying that out and sharing with us the choice, the very intentional choice that was made and moving in that direction. And since you've actually named Holly as sort of co-conspirator in this, I feel like that's a great handoff to Holly to sit down and talk about how those worlds meet.
Yes, thank you for that. Gosh, let me see. It has been pretty amazing to have the opportunity to be in an organization that first of all wants to work this rigorously to bring a sense of alignment to their sense of values, and the value of being in relationship. I think that one of the things that has been important, or that I would love to just kind of name, is that sometimes we don't really know how to deeply care about anything unless we are at the brink of it being lost. And I think that the pandemic brought us to our knees in recognizing that our planet could be lost. I know I had major shifts in my own reconciliation with my own body, my life, my career, because my mom died, because my dear friend was murdered, because I had a child. Like, all of these things taught my body what was at stake, what was genuinely at stake if we did not know how to care or love. And so I think the resiliency, the call in our bodies to do this work, often ushered through pain, that we find a deep purpose, because we live the scars. So I want to just name the courage of all of our bodies, that if you are here because you are one of these warriors, I welcome you with so much love. If you are here because you are confused, because you have been under-resourced and under-cared for, I welcome you, and I deeply understand your body. So there's something about getting to work with CONTRA-TIEMPO, to get to do the work in our field for bodies that are here, because they're not just beautiful to look at. Yes, they are. They are extraordinary creatures, but they carry our wounds. And in the carrying of our wounds, they are our teachers. They can teach us what it means to heal. And so there's been this great opportunity to work with a dance company to actually ask the bodies, what do you want, or what do you need? What have you not had in your sense of wholeness? What's been under-resourced? How do we meet that? And so getting to actually just do the work of asking questions, getting to work with an entire organization that is grounding itself rigorously to just ask every day, what are the things? And to not always know, to just not know, but how extraordinary it is to just meet with the agreement that that's a question we're asking. Not something we know, just a question every day that we just meet each other and ask the question, what would you need? Like, how do we even know what we need? And if we could meet it, what would that even feel like? So I feel like that has been one of the lucky things. And I don't know that I've worked with an organization that meets first, not just like the agreement to champion all the things we know and the things that we're doing, but literally just grounds itself in like, how many of the things do we not know? How many of the things are we just sitting to ask questions? Like there was a gorgeous example just today in our staff meeting. Anna Maria was not with us, but yeah, one of our staff members was actually just speaking about how in this moment they feel very dehumanized because it is so difficult to be a human being right now, wiping away your tears, looking at the pain of humanity, and then being required to sit down and write an operational budgets grant. How weird that feels. How strange to feel like you're asked to be kind of mechanical at the same time you are engorged with the most like kind of intense experience of your own humanity. And I felt like I was lucky to be able to say, I think that's a question worth stopping to ask. That rather than pretend like we're in a staff meeting, just like jumping over to try to be productive or to ask somebody to do more.
Mm.
What if the timing right now was to ask ourselves, how would we answer that? What does it feel like to be dehumanized? Could we just stop and pause and care that there's somebody within our group who is showing up to work today carrying that load? So for me, I feel like that the work of getting to be with CONTRA-TIEMPO, getting to do my work in conjunction is just that, is this inquiry of how do we get to love each other? How do we know how to meet each other's needs? And how do we even organize a group of people or our labor to just ground in that every day? And so I feel really grateful that that's the work that Anna Maria and I get to do with everybody in the organization. But that's sort of where we are intersecting, where we meet and where our foundation is. That is how our friendship and our relationship got built, was in the like, we have so many similar kinds of conditions in our lives, but Anna Maria and I both fundamentally really share the work of like, I don't know, but I really am committed to learning how to love better. And so we spend the days just kind of asking ourselves, how could we get better at that?
Thank you so much for that, and for the acknowledgement of what we hold in our bodies. The thing that hasn't been named that is also something very unique about this gathering of extraordinary human beings is the fact that we come from a movement background. So what's interesting about that is that there's a whole lot of knowledge that exists on the inside of our bodies and is constantly talking to us. Dancers know this. They know what I'm talking about because we talk all the time about these body parts like it's another human being with us. You know, my knee told me I was doing too much. You know, my back told me I did the most, right? So there's a way that the body is in communication with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I lift that up because that's also like you and Anna Maria with that connection. There's a connection between the work that Shannon and I have been doing, our exchanges as just people in what it means to be in leadership, our discoveries, and also there's a real relationship between our organizations that dates the age of the organizations.
Mm.
So it's a second generation of both leadership and a second generation of partnership and a second generation of sharing of learning. So with that, I'm going to pass that baton to Shannon about the moment or an experience that kind of led you to this path.
I'm trying to distill down to a moment. because there are so many notable entry points. I'm gonna do like at least two. So one, I'm thinking about Summer Leadership Institute, which is nearly annual practice that Urban Bushwoman holds in partnership with Junebug and People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And I cannot recall what year this was. Might have been 2011, maybe. And it was during our institute, and Junebug had invited IWEST, the Institute of Women's and Ethnic Studies in New Orleans, to be a part of the institute. Now, it's always standard practice at the Institute that we have what we call the positive porch, and it's a place for the facilitators to have a separate space that is a room for restoration, communing, caring, being. And the understanding is that that 10-day workshop is a lift. We are interrogating systemic racism and how it lives inside our bodies. We're looking at organizing as practitioners, and as facilitators, we're holding ecosystem of learners and practitioners. We're holding space, and we're also culling our own learning. So it's a heft that we're taking on. And so there's an understanding inside of that there needs to be a place where we can go to retreat or to gather, and it's not a meeting room. There's actually like often a room that's like, you cannot meet in here. What, Shana, are you talking about? Go out the door. You know, like it's a hard fix. In 2011, I believe it was, that year, IWEST came and they created this red tent that was for the whole of the Institute. And the way that it changed the climate and the culture, where everyone had this evening where we did less, right? So there was less learning, because in order to create that economy of time for care, it meant that the schedule couldn't be as thick with some of the other panels and things that may have normally been a part of the workshop. But instead, people came back and they were able to have acupuncture or Reiki or sound bath, or have chatted up with the homie while giving salt scrubs to each other. And there was a space to go and massage and lounge and be. And something about that space making as part of the organizing practice left an impression. Fast forward, so that was 2011-ish, maybe. 2019, the Summer Leadership Institute theme was, when Black women plus prevail, we all prevail. And again, partnering or drawing from the teachings of IWEST, Dr. Denise Shervington, her book, Healing is the Revolution, was one of the resource guides that we used for that. And there was, talking about it being in the body, there was just an swelling. I was going to say whelming, but that puts a judgment on it that I don't want to say. There was a swelling of noting of fatigue and trauma and illness that was named and embodied as part of the embodied synthesis of that institute. And so myself, Stephanie, my fellow co-artistic director, Amjada Spies, and I, we had a lot of conversation around what it meant to give more space inside of the artistic and organizing practice to examine this. This is 2019. So this is also the year that myself and Mamjada become the co-artistic directors of Urban Bushwoman. So we're creating a new company. Yes, we're right here. we're creating a new work. We audition new company members. We're inside of the rightness of our vision. We bring on new collaborators. We started working with Adaku Uta and invited her to do some coaching with us on wellness and trust building, and was really aligned in the way that she was noting wellness as individual and collaborative practice. That what's well for me is different for every individual on the screen. And then also, what does it mean to attend to the collective practice and culture? And then COVID hits, and all the things that just came out my mouth just now. Right? 2020, and the things that we were ruminating on as creative practice became urgent to a different degree. And one of the things that was our first stumbling blocks was how we were enacting these things that we were looking at in our organizing and in our art making on our home front. Tanya Bell, who is our interim executive director, is a longtime Urban Bushwoman family member from Summer Leadership Institute, managing director, from operations managing director to now her current role. And so she had been inside of the real careful holding of our values in an intimate way. And yet, Mom Dada and I hadn't been in organizing practice with her yet. So when 2020 hit, we were not in conversations readily that were allowing us to address the speed and the fear and the change that we were being hit with and that was spewing from the inside. I wrote down, Holly, earlier when you were like, stop, pause, listen. I feel like if Mom Jada didn't say those exact words, she said something very close, like, why do we have to go so fast? And it's like, because we got to apply for the PPP and we don't even know what the PPP is. Like, there was so much happening. And I will say we didn't immediately pause. And so we stumbled along for a moment. And then Mom Jada, myself, and Tanya had some real come to Jesus moments where we were like, okay, we've got to get into an organizing practice that is going to allow us to attend to the humans that we're working with, the culture that we're working with internally, what needs to shift, what needs to be aired out, what needs to be examined, and what needs to be more richly informed. And so it's been a process, and Tanya Bell is really alongside us inside of building this practice that is both artistic, organizational, and also structural. We're looking at care and wellness really in both of those pots, I would say, like what's happening, or I guess all of those pots, because there's a third. There's the organizing that Urban Bushwoman does inside of the field. There's the artistic work that we build. And then there's the way that we are in organizing and structural relationship with each other as an organization. And so we're readily examining, building, and shoring up how we're looking at care with those being our multiple entry points.
Thank you, Shannon. We kind of came into some of that learning around the same time. So if I can be in conversation with you, some of this stuff we were like learning at the same time. So Junebug and UBW have a tendency of being running on parallel tracks in the world. And so there's a lot of sharing that happens between us because one of us will get to that space before the other gets there. And so they're the ones sounding the alarm for the thing that you can expect that's coming up, right? But the thing that Shannon mentioned before about the red tent as a part of the Urban Bushwomen Summer Leadership Institute, I want to draw a little bit of attention to that, because it's in that world. It's a microcosm of what we experience every day in our own work. And it was the Institute of Women in Ethnic Studies, or IWES, that helped us to understand it. And what they did, we couldn't understand that why all of a sudden on a Wednesday, everybody was wilding out. Now, imagine that. You got anywhere from 60 to over 100 people, some of which have never met before. They're all going to meet in one space. We're all going to take class together. We're going to dance together. We're going to warm up together. We're going to do all of that. We're going to have challenging conversations around race and privilege. And then we're going to talk about entering community. And then we're going to talk about place. You know, so sometimes we were looking at New Orleans and examining what was happening in New Orleans as we were there and rooted in place. So we're going to do all that with anywhere from 60 to 100 people that we don't necessarily know, that we haven't necessarily worked with. And it's going to do that in 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, we're going to make something that's a showing. We're going to make some art. So you can see how all the conditions for mass chaos are there. In fact, when it comes out of my mouth, I can't even believe that we did it. I'm asking myself, why did we do that? But every time on a Wednesday, stuff would go left. And it wasn't until we had this conversation with IWES that they shared with us, they said, well, what you're experiencing are group dynamics, and it's the 5 stages of group formation. And so for those that aren't familiar with it, the stages, there's the initial stage, the team conflict stage, the team settlement, the team performance, and group disillusion. And it's called, the way that they name each one of those sections is the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And where we were very clearly in was the storming area. And that all of these things are actually necessary for us to have peak performance, right? They're all necessary. So even though we name one of them as conflict, it is some things that don't quite make sense for us. And we got to work through that. And it's chaotic. And sometimes people don't show up as their best selves, depending on how chaotic it is, right? People are learning how to work with each other. People are learning what kind of leader they are and what they bring to the table. I think, I'm not sure about Anna Marie and Shannon, I'm looking at both of them. It wasn't until I was in the position that I'm in now at Junebug that I realized what kind of leader I was, but also what I needed in order to be the best leader, right? And so that might mean for me recognizing that folks that are real nervous Nellies, and I got to have the answer right now, that come to me, I just shut down. Because that's not what I need in that time. If that's making sense to anybody on here, and I know it's like 53 people on this call, I know somebody will understand that, right? That's not what I needed at that time. And I realized that, oh, that energy puts me in this space of like worry, and not in that space of like, let me take all of the information in and come up with a strategy, right? For us to figure out strategy for that. But that couldn't have happened without that conflict or the initial stage of what it means. And so we are consistently, regularly moving through that cycle of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning on all of the work that we do on each of the projects. So can you imagine that during the pandemic, everybody was in that. at the same time. The whole world was in it at the same time. And so, yes, there is going to be conflict on the inside of that. And some of that I want us to decipher also how you show up in conflict. I can only do that for myself, right? But I know how I don't want to show up in conflict, right? And so it does ask us to be very reflective of like where we are. I have other questions.
Can I just, Stevie, just thank you so much for naming our relationship to conflict, because I think that's so often making major shifts or like completely redirecting the direction of where an organization is going. It's hard. It's hard, and a lot of people don't like change, and you're gonna piss people off, and there's gonna be there's things that happen and occur out of change, out of shifts, out of redirections. And I think there is a profound wisdom in what you just named, which is the like being willing to be comfortable in some ways and lean into some of that discomfort of conflict, and that it's unavoidable in doing meaningful people-centered work. You're not gonna ever get to like not participate in things that fall apart. Like it's part of it. And so I do think that we oftentimes in our society don't actually learn as people in our families or in our organizations how to be inside of conflict in a way that doesn't wind up destroying relationships or destroying people's ability to actually engage and be together. And I think that if there were anything that is a tool to like do the work around, is that being willing to be inside, like both analyzing yourself, but also like practicing, doing the practice of like, what does it actually take to be inside of conflict?
It's reminding me of our the founding artistic director of Junebug, John O'Neill, and him saying our job as artists is to examine our work and the world around us with a ruthless honesty with ourselves and with each other, right? Like it is imperative that we are very honest. A ruthless honesty is the thing that really stays in my mind around what it means to examine the work that we do with each other in that particular space.
Stephanie, before you go on, it makes me think about how we talk about it in the body. What we do is like, if you can imagine just finding yourself in like a little, finding yourself in like a little groove and a wobble, sometimes I even like to put on the wobble line dance, like where it feels good, like, oh yeah, wobble is my jam, right? And then if you could shift yourself to balancing on like from your seat, one butt cheek, and trying to find that same wobble. And then if it was available to you, trying to balance on your hands or on, one foot if that was available, and trying to find the same like joy and availability inside of that wobble. And then we take that same kind of exploration and then trying to find stillness. And what we're looking at is the value in the wobble. There's oftentimes inside of movement practice, there's this thing of like hit it, stick it, and I gotta be there and I can't move it. And what we like to lift up is that there's actually like the wobble is a space of groove and authenticity. The wobble is also a space of navigation and noticing. Like if I'm on that, one leg or on my hands, my body is like, okay, a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the left. You can find, there's a negotiation that helps me find where that homeostasis is. And if I can value the wobble, then it's a place of information finding, and that's gonna give me more information about centering than if I were to just assert a notion of stillness or holding. And liken it to what you're saying right now, it's like not only is conflict and the wobble unavoidable, it's actually really valuable if we're trying to evolve, if we're trying to be change agents, that at some point change is asking us, or we're asking ourselves as people who are like have chosen pathways of changing, like we're asking ourselves to decenter ourselves from what is known. And so that's like, that is readily leaning into a space of the wobble so that we can find arrive at a new moment of homeostasis that better reflects the ways that we want to exist inside of wholeness, and liberation, and whatever the things are that ground our values and mission. And so I appreciate you lifting up conflict as a point in the process. I think that I like that care can also hold space for dissonance and discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Still be considerate of and the folks that I'm in relationship, to still be considerate of our humanity.
I so appreciate you lifting that up, that discomfort, and naming it as discomfort, I think allows us to like go into another, a comfortable space, you know what I mean, versus an uncomfortable space, versus what safe space is, versus all of that, right? That's really important, because even as you, like, if I were to say something with my body and use that as the example, there are some things that are uncomfortable and that I'm like, I'm not quite good at. And then there are the things that are just painful. And then I know for a fact I'm not supposed to do that, right? And so if we take that as an example, there are things that are uncomfortable. Those are the things that we can learn from. That has some value. The things that hurt us, those are things that there might be some learning on one end. It might also mean a fracture in a relationship on another end. And so that to me isn't necessarily the answer, but definitely we as human beings can have the capacity to hold discomfort, to hold dissonance, and to do that in a way that we keep our values of what it means to be in community. My God, if we don't know how to hold dissonance as a community that is doing this work, I mean, think about that for a minute. We shouldn't be doing this work. I mean, I dare say, or maybe we shouldn't be politicians either, right? So we we have a responsibility to each other, be able to hold that in a way that we can come, that does not fracture relationships, but that we're able to have it's a conversation, right? It's a conversation. May I ask y'all a couple of more questions? Just a couple. Just a couple, because things are so interconnected, and I really deeply appreciate this. Holly, I'm gonna switch over to you for a moment, because you named something that I think is really important for people to examine, right? You named, and I need to name that as well, right? Is that another space of me really examining and knowing that I can't continue to move like this is the loss of my mother. So it was like the back-to-back, well, it was back-to-back things. So the pandemic happens. That's difficult enough. My first thing that I said to staff was, my value is in holding you here and not laying anybody off. But you gotta trust me. You're gonna want answers, and I'm not gonna have those answers for you. But I promise you, we will get through this. We might have to tighten our belts, but we can get through this, right? It was when things started to come back online that I felt, for me, things started going awry. It was at that moment, we'd already lost so many people, right? I mean, almost too painful for my soul to name the number of people that were lost, the number of culture bearers and friends and loved ones that was lost during that time. But just as you're working through that, I had a back-to-back loss. I lost my grandfather and my mother within 6 months of each other. And right after my grandfather passed away, just before a hurricane hit the area. So I'm moving like this because that's how I felt. I felt completely decentered, right? Difficult. That was less than a wobble. That was just like, I'm completely off my center. I don't know where to go. And it was like during that time, it's really difficult to have conversations around budget when the bulk of the responsibility for finding the money falls on you. And you're kind of in the space of, I kind of don't care about anything right now. Like if we're amongst, let me be honest, in this room of 51 people right now, I did not care. And when I say 0 F's given for any of that, as I'm sure you would imagine if you lost somebody, that's the last thing that you're thinking about, right? And so I really did feel, and I still do, and I'm not even quite sure where I'm at with that. I'm examining where I am in the world and where I am in conversation with this. And I would just like for you to talk. Yeah, I felt like you brought that up and then you started talking about other things, but that was a real moment to name because a lot of people are working from a similar hurt place.
Yes. Thank you for that. I just feel like yes, I just want to hold that in your body, in my body, in our bodies, that we don't really talk enough about why we do what we want to be doing, why the work feels necessary in our own bodies, why it's meaningful. Is because we've lived the hurt, we've lived the sorrow and the loss, and we know what it feels like. And I think that that's the kind of stuff, that reconciliation that my body came to, that before I think I tried to always create some sort of filter rather than just being direct and honest about like, this is what I genuinely feel is meaningful in my life. And then this clear, intolerant thing where I was, same like you, I could give a fuck. It became so clear about what was not meaningful because I wouldn't labor for it, wouldn't lift a finger for it, would not beat anything towards it. My body didn't do it. When it came to starting to recognize what was meaningful, it was because my body cared, not because I chose it. Because somewhere my body showed up for you because I wanted to. Somewhere my body still, even under the weight of I don't want this, I don't want to do this, I still found myself step touch. I still felt myself in the warble. I could still feel rhythm. Even when it made no sense and I didn't actually want to feel these things, my body still did. And when certain people came in a room, my body woke up and it felt you. And it felt some want and desire to be in relationship. That started to inform my body in such a real way. Like, why do I want to be a part of the dance field? Why do I want to do this? I don't know, because I'll be real with, I'm sure, a lot of us. I don't know. I genuinely was like, I don't know. A lot of this feels crazy. And then it was the only thing that made sense. Being in relationship with certain bodies, humans, dancing, movement, resistance, pleasure. This was the only thing that started to make sense. And so I think that's what kept calling to me, is I don't know how to make sense of a world that there's a part of my body that keeps shutting it out, just wants to shut it out. But there's this other part of my body that just was so much smarter than all my rage, than all my hurt. And that was this thing that was like, I can't help it. I love you. There's a part of my body that loves your body. That's what's up. That's what's meaningful. And so I think being able to listen to, like, how does my body know that? How did I come to know this when I don't actually sometimes choose it? It was movement. It was touch. It was music. It was this thing that was like, thank goodness our bodies are designed to know how to love each other, because I think there's a part of myself that forgot, that doesn't want to, that just simply thinks it's too hard. Thank goodness for the oxytocin. Thank goodness for our skin. Thank goodness for all of those properties that are our bodies, because I think those are the ones that showed me, how do I rebuild a civilization I want to be a part of? How do I come through the hurt and the sorrow in the shaping of the human I want to be? And so I think, yeah, just letting my body be my body, rather than me engineering having to do so much, but just quieting enough to be like, you should listen. Who do you want to be with?
Mm-hmm.
Who does your body genuinely want to be with? And then be with those bodies. Who do you not want to be with?
Yeah.
And make the agreement that you are not going to be with those bodies as often, and set more limits. So I think somewhere the depth of just only getting to rely on my body out of necessity was again a place that helped me understand, what do I want to found are the principles of being in relationship in a new civilization.
Thank you. I want to name that this is also a group of folks that are female identified. And I want to name, and also women of color. I want to name that this experience also falls very differently in these worlds. They look very different. And when we talk about pressure, oftentimes we've moved up a ladder on the inside of a space that has been male dominated, and that has looked at you as the one to do this work. So I also realize that some of it comes out of how we're raised. I come out, it's always with a Black Southern woman's perspective that I look at that. I happen to be inside of a family that has a very long maternal line, in a grouping of women right now, as this is what I'm seeing, because my husband says this is the thing that the women in the family do. They're constantly directing stuff and telling people where to go, what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. Work seems to be the love language. And I had to decipher what part of that work is work that is done with great love, and what part of that is like obligatory, right? Inside of the work framework and canon, a lot of that has been obligatory, right? And has not come from a space of love. So I want to just name that inside of this space right now as something that just looks very different. And I'm going to move us.
Wait, can I?
Okay.
One thing, it reminds me of, I lifted up a docu a couple of times, coach that's been working with us. And so a docu had us examining how we show up in conflict. And they offer a couple of different ways in which that looks. Like, do you lean in and do you want to fix all the things? Do you say, I'm out, and, peace sign, and, or are you like, okay, put up your deuce and you wanna fight? Those were just like broad strokes. And a doc was like, you're gonna be like, I do all those things. And there's one that you major in. And and so I was looking at that, leaning in and like, okay, like, this thing. And I was examining a similar thing for myself, like, okay, that's from practice, that's from asset. And I was like, oh, after the whole workshop, it's also from default. And my body was like, Shannon, fall back. And I noticed that even the way that I was like sitting in my chair was like, I'm not facilitating. Adako is facilitating. Why are you like up in the screen, Shannon? It was like, girl, just fall back. Like, be fully in followership right now. And you don't actually have to hold the thing. And that's been really delicious learning for myself, is to just note when I don't actually have to hold and carry, and to see like where I create. I don't say I created, but the myth is no longer serving. At some point it served. At some point it made way for. And right now it's like fall back.
Yeah. I I wonder, and you probably have more than one thing, right? But I'm just also really curious about the things. If you can name like 2 things organizationally that you feel are as a part of that lineage of care, right? And the things and places that we've learned. Can you point to 2 things? Again, I'm saying point to 2 things that you're proud of inside the organization, or some places of learning in the organization, to avoid the pitfall of like, this is the how-to. It's not the how-to, but we were on a journey and there's some things that we're sitting and we're thinking about. And so I'll model it and I'll share the 2 things. One was for the organization. We just recognized that working via Zoom like this really has not worked and served us at all. Sometimes it's necessary and we worked it, but it has created more work. And what it has done is we've lost connection with each other. Our greatest asset is our connection. It's a kinesthetic feel, it's real. And that we committed to investment in that. So we just finished a staff retreat where committing to kind of understanding our history a little bit more and having conversations. But the main thing was leaving space for human connection. And so we did it. It was at, a nice, retreat space on a beach. We were able to walk the beach, pick up seashells, talk to each other, stay up late at night, had somebody who cooked. So food was not an issue for us. We had somebody there cooking for us. Snacks were readily available. So it was to feed the heart, the mind, the body, the soul. An investment in that, we will see the return on that investment by how people work, right? And how they are with each other. The second part that we're committed to, I can't tell you that we figured it all out, but I can tell you we're committed to it, is we had a long conversation with my board about a paid sabbatical. I will say this inside this room of 49 people. There are not a lot of examples of paid sabbaticals in the nonprofit field. That is a space that if we don't figure that out and have that at least as one of the benefits of staying at an organization, we're going to lose a lot of people that are just completely burned out. This is and should be a benefit of people who have given their time. It's not going to be because we're making a lot of money. Everybody knows that. So, it's not like we going to, setting ourselves up for Forbes working in nonprofit, especially in the South. But this is something else that is a benefit. And so we finally got our board to like agree to that, even though that we are ourselves looking at what that framework is. What I'm proud about, though, is that as I'm creating the road while walking it, as we're creating the road by walking it, it'll be something that has longevity in the organization. and is a commitment that is there and will be there for generations long after I'm gone. It'll be there as a framework for anybody else who gives that amount of time at the organization. So that's my share back.
On top for me is the building that Mamjada and I are doing alongside Tanya Bell, which I mentioned before. And that's so significant because we didn't have a model for the artistic and the administrative leads building together in a creative practice that was looking at the whole organizational ecosystem. So there's something that's new about us being inside of creative, innovative work together, anchored by the same values. And I'm excited about what we're learning. I'm thankful for this also, just the share of the lift of that, because new means new. It means sometimes we got it, sometimes we don't. And so for us to be in really intentional collaboration with that has been really powerful. I'm really thankful for the folks who have contributed to the learning that we're doing, as is practice for Urban Bushwomen. We've not arrived at any of the ways that we're grappling and practicing care and wellness on our own. It is definitely the intuition and assets of the folks inside of the organization, as well as folks who we've invited in to share and to teach and to lead, alongside a doc who I've already lifted up, Nia Eubanks-Dixon, who specializes in trauma-informed facilitation, Danita Nicole, who is a spiritual and energetic wellness specialist, Amara Tabor-Smith, who of the many roles that Amara holds, choreographer, performer, organizer, she also holds, she titles herself as a death doula, and her organizing practice around making space for grief and looking at grieving as restorative and sustaining practice has deeply informed our work. So I'm also, I feel really appreciative, and I think I could say champion the learning that we've had that's been, because of the ways in which Mamjada and Tanya and I have been building, that we had this learning come in, and then we've had ways to practice it and exercise. So it's not, so the learning is active. And we are readily finding, how does this all translate inside of new organizational structures? And so in some ways that's meant new hires, so that folks are not holding as many roles, and so it's both like adjusting hierarchy, but also just like literal workload. We're in the examining of work rhythm, like how do we take, how do we take the places of pause and still be in meaningful work that is both our mission and also our function as an organization. So I love that we're having those conversations, and finding solutions around that are budget with care, with people, with culture, holding those all.
I was gonna say, I'm like, as we're all talking, I'm like, this one, that. There's like a million different examples and things that I would want to share, but I think one of the things that keeps coming up for me is the ways this was something that we were doing, and we've been doing it honestly since the beginning of CONTRA-TIEMPO, is like, when someone makes a transition out of the company is holding a circle, a care circle, a circle of acknowledgement and gratitude for this person. And it's like dedicating some time and space to really, acknowledge the contributions of that person, to acknowledge the ways in which they've impacted everyone who's had the opportunity to work with them. There's this way that there's this practice of being able to really have people leave feeling both acknowledged and connected and inside of the organization as a whole. And with that said, there were ways that the ways in which people made transitions in the past were not always consistent. Some people had really incredible transitions and some people had really difficult, challenging transitions. And with that said, I think over the last several years, we've really gone into a deep practice of restorative justice and transformative justice as like the framework for thinking about having conversations, difficult conversations. And so many of the transitions that have more recently happened have come out of conversations that have looked less like, I think it's time for you to transition out, and more like a conversation, which is, what are you needing? And this is what we are needing. And are those things aligned? And actually that those conversations don't look like hierarchical conversations of like, it's time for you to go. It looks like real, actual human beings in connecting with one another around their needs. And that it actually doesn't have to feel hierarchical or punitive or like someone feels disempowered inside of the choices, but that a choice can actually become a mutual choice that everyone feels that they were heard and connected inside of. And so that I feel like we're learning how to do that better in a way that every single time we do it, it's like working a muscle, but it's a practice that feels like we're getting better and better every time we have different transitions happening. And then also I just think the caring for bodies feels like a really powerful commitment inside of our organization. And caring for bodies means doing more hires, like you said, Shannon, like distributing work more evenly. So one or two people aren't holding everything, but they're being much more of a horizontal way of working across the organization, and which means more people, more human beings taking on responsibility and being paid for it. In the past, we've often like offered our dancers body work and people wouldn't take advantage of it. And there's this way that I think the organization is shifting and people are starting to understand the ways in which caring for our bodies actually permeates into everything else that we're doing. And so that there's more participation in that, and there's more, and it's still a place of growth. It's still a place that we need to continue to work on, but the making relationship between how bodies are cared for and how it's not just the dancers on stage being cared for, but also our staff, right? Being participants in that feels like, again, something that I feel like we're really working diligently and in a really committed way towards, that I feel proud of. I feel like those are the two that I would say. Holly, if you.
Thank you. I see Holly was putting some things in, and I encourage you and Shannon, because I'm also like looking at the time, that there is a feeling of wanting practical things, because we have done some practical things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sharing of what those practical things are. I've put some things in that you've mentioned, that I talked about. So we'll continue to populate this chat with what those practical things are. And Holly, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, and I just wanting to just add to and echo is one of the things that I feel like has been such a beautiful practice is the non-deferment of care. It's the non-deferring of time, where it's like at a later time your needs can be addressed. 2 weeks from now, there's an appointment available where your need might be met. There's something that's happening right now practically that by being able to say, I have a need, I feel it right here, right now, I'm presenting it as it emerges. could it be responded to? That kind of union in time with one another, this seems really powerful. And it isn't always about like, hey, I'm hearing you, here's this magic solution. Like I just put a Band-Aid on it and it fixed it. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not always like handing somebody a solution. It's about giving the time to be like, I am really hearing you. There is a response forthcoming that is happening right now with you because we are in this conversation. And that recognition that we are responding. I am hearing you. The active in time with one another rather than the wait for it. There's something about this meeting bodies that I feel like has been really, really powerful that I've been able to witness is to be able to be on tour. And rather than say, when you go home, you can get care, but be on tour with a somatic specialist that's able to say, right now, this hurts. Let's lay down. Let's see how we can respond to it. Let's see how this moves us forward. So
Yeah.
just in relationship to time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I wanna name a couple of things that have been added. We've been looking through the chat and a couple of things that are really, I think, important for us to remember. Someone lifted up, Lenora Naxon lifted up the importance of naming the generational shift that's happened that is like demanding change, demanding this work-life balance, the idea of like being paid more, of setting of limits and sharing of responsibilities, that is also a generational thing. Again, that gets to what that dissonance looks like, right? And sometimes oftentimes it's generations that come in and create that dissonance. So I want to thank you so much for naming that. I want to also lift up in the chat, Amanda, thank you so much for lifting this up. I'll read the chat. And we don't think that you're on the other side at all. So she says, at the risk of sounding like I'm on the other side of the fence, which isn't the case. All of these things have large budget implications. And I feel like when these conversations happen, there isn't a conversation around how this all affects budgets and the budgets for the projects, which includes people as well. And so I think, so number one, yeah, budgets are always the issue. I think it is, to me, it reminds me of the space of being at the crossroads when there are actually lots of options for you to choose. And it's a matter of deciding and making a commitment to one of those options. So I would offer, they all have budget implications, and so does a mass exodus of people has budget implications and a massive effect on the organizations. So when you see something bubbling up there, perhaps that's giving us information that maybe there's somewhere else or something that we need to invest in that hasn't happened before, but perhaps we should actually think about something. So maybe it's doing less in the year, right? Doing less and paring some things down in order to find the money to invest in this other thing, in order to keep that staff that you need. But again, I don't want to make it like that is a that's the be all end all. It isn't, and you have to carefully navigate that space, which is why I said this is a conversation, and I think an ongoing one. And who is that? That's Amanda. Is it Amanda? Yeah.
Could I just share too that there is, as a case study, when we started rooting down, doing less and rooting down into our values as like guiding principles and really actually slowing everything down. I think that like Stephanie, saying doing less is absolutely, or was it Beatrice? Our budget has like more than tripled. And I just want to name that because I feel like the quality of the work that we are able to do from this committed framework is vastly different. And I think it's like, it's the thing where when you build it, it will come, or whatever. That idea that like money will show up when you are moving in alignment. and I don't mean to sound real California woo-woo, but the bottom line is when you are moving in alignment, resources show up inside of that alignment. And I don't think that that's normally how we move in our field. We move from a place of like hustle, 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 depletion, depletion, depletion. And it's a changing the framework. It's a completely and totally, it's a radical shift of framework. And so I think, yeah, there's something to be said that radical shift, there being inside of that commitment for that radical shift it changes everything, including your capacity to sometimes find resources where you didn't think resources existed before because of the commitment. Yeah.
I want to
wanna say-
encourage also, just before you
Mhm.
add, Shannon, I want to
Yeah.
encourage everybody, all the people that are attended here, to just add to the chat, because this is group learning and all of us have a variety of ways of doing this. But if you would add how you would like to see care show up differently now. How would you like to see care show up now in that? If you can add that to the chat, we would appreciate that. Amanda, I'm so grateful for that. It really has me sitting down and thinking about that. How do you balance that in terms of real budget implications? I'm very grateful for that. And so if we can continue to kind of populate that while Shannon.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, because the opposite side of the fence that I'm on is that we are not in a season of doing less right now. I just want to say that, depending on how aware you are of what's happening with Urban Bushwomen right now, you might be aware as well. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary, evolutionary change with the founding artistic director shifting into a different capacity outside the organization. So it's yeah, we're doing a lot of things right now, and so the ways in which that's happening on the inside is how to take care when we are doing a lot. And in that way, the staffing, both administrative and production, has been in tandem with the amount of output, but also how to do so without what's already been looked up, burning people to the ground. And I think one of the things that's been helpful, that I've really appreciated that Tanya's been doing, is making the budgeting process more transparent organization-wide. I think that we are in a time when artist labor laws are really something that we're having to address as a field, and how to be more just and more accountable. And I think that one of the ways in which Tanya is holding that and shaping is not, sometimes it's not always just changing the dollar amount, but giving folks more information on, like, here's what's happening in our organization, here's what's happening in our field, this is what's happening in the country that our field is in relationship with. And I think I think that having a more holistic understanding helps people to have more understanding. You have more understanding. You have more understanding. You have more buy-in. You can be more collaborative inside of that. And so that's so I think the budget piece is not just about the adjustment of carrying the two. I think it's also about it being a more inclusive process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Shannon. I want to give, I've always wanted to say this. I'm going to give a shout out to, but I am wanting to do this to some things that are there. This conversation around budget that Amanda started, thank you, Amanda Cooper, started. We're still interrogating that. Thank you for that. I look forward to another time that we're able to sit down and, like, how might we approach that? I think it's important for us to understand that inside of our budget processes, we are navigating, both income and expenses, and those things don't have to be in conflict with each other.
Yeah.
right? They don't have to be in conflict with each other. Rather, it's a balancing of those things out based on where you are and where you stand in terms of the values of the organization. So I look forward to that conversation. I also want to shout out Michelle Daly, mentioning for those who are in positions of service to the work, arts admin in particular, how do we hold the same space for ourselves? We strive to create for the artists and the work. And I say that we don't compartmentalize those things, that we look at that and look at all folks in that same bucket of care that we talk about. We could go on forever with this. I'm looking at, and the conversation just got hot. It got real good as this is happening. Let me say and put some more pressure on Krista, as if they need that. I'll put some pressure on Krista and the other folks and Willie and all the good folks at at APAP. I would like to see part 2 of this happen in person at APAP in 2 ways. One, a conversation, and the second one is we create the experience of care. And so we put a team of people together to talk about what might that look like for us to create a space of care, a red tent, if you will, right in the middle of APAP, so that people get to not hear about it, but you get to feel it and be steeped in what that means.
Can I up the ante on the request also? Is that we reach out to some funders who would actually fund a program that would be about organizations committing to care and like actually implementing some new and experimental strategies inside of their organizations with funding to support that. Because I do think the budget thing constantly comes up, and what it looked like for people to actually have a chunk of money to distribute internally in their organization specifically for that, and how I think we'd have a lot of data after a funding initiative like that there would be impact. And so I think, it would be both funding and maybe some evaluation around it.
Absolutely. I'll share, I know only of one organization, and that's the Women's Foundation of the South in New Orleans, that actually has given out grants specifically to women leadership. That would, those grants were, it was creating a larger culture of care in the South amongst women leaders. So I want to shout them out. If you get a chance to go and take a look at the work that they have, Awoke at Rest is the programmatic framework for that. If you want to take a look at that, Women's Foundation in the South, run by Carmen James Randolph. I think it's really great example of what that might look like as a funding initiative. I'm so grateful for this space. I think we want to hear the ideas and the feedback from everyone that's there. David Herrera, Performance Company, I hear you. If we're doing something in person at APAP, it creates barriers to those who can't afford to go. And I say, let's keep plugging away at what might that look like and how we can replicate. APAP is not the only place, it's a both and. So this is one space that can happen, but the goal is, if an example is given for what that might look like, that there is a ripple effect of care that happens inside of all of our communities, right? Inside of our work, that we might be able to create that also for people, not just in the line of work that we do, but our communities. That's how these red tents got started for free in the community of New Orleans after Katrina. So you got to understand, there's a group of people who don't know anything about Reiki. You know what I mean? A large group of folks who hadn't been exposed to Reiki or any of those healing modalities, that these things were open and done for free inside of a struggling community post-Katrina. So we have these examples, and I encourage us all to stay in conversation with each other, to love on each other, to breathe, and to continue to learn from each other. I'm very grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for joining us. You could have been anywhere, but you decided to give your time to us today. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you,
Thank
Siobhan, Holly.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you to all of you.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.